I walk by faith and not by sight. All power and authority is given unto me. 'Cause when you're on God's side, oh, we win, we win. Overcomers, we win. Nothing can stop us now. Hey, we win, you declare. We proclaim the victory, yeah. Overcomers, we win, yeah. Nothing can stop us now. We win. Oh. We know in God there's no spirit of fear. We'll never feel defeat because He's here. The race is not given to the swift, neither the battle to the strong, but he that endureth to the end. We win. Woo! Come on, come on. We win, say. We win. We win, yeah. We win, yeah. Every area of our life. Yeah, we win. Overcomers. In our school, on our job. Nothing can stop us now. In our marriage, in our finances. We are, yeah. More than a conqueror. We dominate. We have the victory. Yeah. We have the
Good evening, and welcome back to the show. You have tuned in to In the End We Win with Curtis, and I am your host, Curtis Austin. Thanks for tuning in once again. Before we get started, I'm going to read an announcement. It was just handed to me, so please, I want to apologize for having to read this announcement. VoxWave now features a streaming radio media player on our website's front page where local artists can get their music played 24/7. For more information on getting your music in rotation or to perform live at the studio, contact Reg Gaskins at 240-832-4455. Android users, the VoxWave app is now available in the Google Play Store. Download the app today on your Android devices to listen in and view programs. Business owners, looking for a place to advertise your business and promote your products and services, VoxWave is the right place. We have over 10,000 views a day and 70,000 listeners a month. For more information, once again, contact Reg Gaskins at 240-832-4455. So once again, my name is Curtis Austin, and you have tuned in to In the End We Win with Curtis. And what's going to happen right now is we are going to introduce our guest, and we're going to jump right into our conversation. And welcome.
Hello.
Welcome back, as a matter of
Oh my
fact.
gosh, thank you so very much for having me once again.
Again, right.
Yes, I'm excited. Thank you. Can I throw out a shout out and just say thank you to the viewers who tuned in heavily last week. It was phenomenal, and it didn't have anything to do with me. It had all to do with the topic.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we appreciate you for coming back, taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Absolutely.
And coming back, because as you said, this is a very important topic. And based on the reviews that we got from last week, I felt that it was imperative that we have Miss Natasha Paris Saint Amand back.
Yes.
Live.
You say my last name so
Saint
well.
Amand. I want to learn French. I really want to be French, perhaps.
Yes.
But basically what we're doing tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to revisit and continue the conversation from last week. Mental health disorders and mental health conditions can't be resolved in an hour's conversation, obviously, right? So, and based then on the responses that we got, you got responses when you left, I got responses, and the show, we had a few caller-ins, and we're looking for you guys to call in again tonight. The phone number to call in is 240-719-2560. We encourage you to call in, and you'll be live on the air, so do us a favor, turn down whatever the device is that you're listening or watching us on, and just speak right into your phone. We'll be able to hear you and talk back and forth. So please tune in or please call in and get your questions answered. But we believe that tonight we're going to tap into some things that we missed last week, and hopefully we will get some answers to you guys that you may be looking for. So what I'd like to do to start the conversation is to put out, in the event that there's someone watching tonight that is dealing with an issue right now, or maybe has a family member that needs some assistance, what is the phone number? Is there a hotline here in the D.C. area, or is it a national hotline number that we can give out so that our viewers can have that number at the ready?
Yes, absolutely. Currently, there is a national hotline, okay? And so if we're talking about crises, are we talking about more from a crisis perspective?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so there's the Suicide National Prevention Suicide Hotline. It's a 24-hour hotline. And there are volunteers and workers who are available to answer any questions and also provide resources and also counsel from a suicide perspective, being able to answer the questions and deal with the client as they need, right, at that moment. And so that number, ready? 1-800-273-8255. That number is 1-800-273-8255. And it's the Suicide National Preventive Lifeline Hotline, okay? And again, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the event that you feel like you feel suicidal or you feel like you're in a mental health crisis, you can reach out to someone, and it is anonymous and it is confidential. And they will provide that information as well as the resources and the crisis support help that you need to address what's going on with you at that moment.
Got you. Okay, so now here's your opportunity to let everyone know exactly who you are and what you do.
Okay, thank you. My name is Natasha Paris St. Amand, as was nicely said by our host. I am an etiquette therapist, and I am certified as a etiquette coach, but I'm also licensed as a mental health clinician. Okay, I'm licensed in 4 different states, and my license really provides me with the wherewithal as well as the skill set and experience to support individuals who are dealing with mental health challenges, mental health concerns, and of course, resources.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's my title, etiquette therapist, and the etiquette pieces, because I have a background in styling as well as makeup artistry and teaching individuals about posture and poise. And so I've combined. You're sitting up straight today. That's awesome. Isn't that fantastic?
It hurts.
It hurts. I know. If you've been doing it for so many years, it takes a while to really get used to it.
That's
right? But, more importantly, I say to my clients and individuals, it's not just about what you look like on the outside, but it's about what you feel like on the inside, being emotionally in control and available to live your best life. And so that's why I believe the two worlds have come together nicely.
Right.
Yes.
And that's a good point, because that's why we're here. That's why I have created this platform, because ultimately I want to make sure that everyone in our community is doing just that, living their best lives. So that's where the name came from. In the end, we win. There are some practical things that we can do. And I am a Christian, and there's some things in the Word that the Bible says that if we do, we will win in the end, as a matter of fact, because God has already worked it out. So it's already done.
Yes.
So to get right into the conversation, let's kind of backtrack to last week's show and try to catch people up to
Sure.
where we left off and just review some things. Can you give us some of the common mental health disorders?
Yes, I can. Okay, we spoke about the common diagnoses, and I went through 2. I had mentioned depression.
Yes.
Okay, that is one of the top common diagnoses that many people deal with on a day-to-day basis. Okay. And also post-traumatic stress disorder. You alluded to that, which is the acronym is PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay. And then also you have children in the area of, from adults to children, ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And then on the back end, you have those who are dealing and struggling with bipolar disorder. That's a major one. That is something, and we can go into detail as to what it is.
Yes.
But bipolar is being able, some people have this misconception that, you're sad one day or sad in 1 hour and then happy in the same hour.
And that's not accurate?
That's not accurate.
Oh, wow.
Yes, because individuals can go through moments of or episodes of sadness for 3-4 months. Right? And then after that, after those 4 months, then they can become very hyper or maniac, not maniac, but mania, where they're extremely happy. Right? They'll be at Walmart and they'll say, you know what, everyone's standing behind me. I'm going to buy all of your groceries, right? I'm going to buy all of the groceries here and everything is on me, right? And then they'll go out and they'll go on a shopping binge, right? Or, they'll, promiscuity when you're talking about having sex and just not caring about life. But there's several different versions of bipolar. It's not just one. You have individuals who are more on the sad than they are on the excited and mania, right?
Okay.
And then you have individuals who are both, right? And so bipolar is one of the most common, along with depression. We talked about depression last time, and that, depression is something that individuals, if they're not dealing with their grief, if they're not dealing with their trauma, it can actually extend to months if you're not seeking support. Right? And so that's another piece. And then post-traumatic stress disorder, which is usually associated with those who've been in the military, who've served in the military, has done, trips at, we'll say, for example, Iraq or Afghanistan, and they've come back and they've had difficulty sleeping, they've had difficulty eating and engaging with their family members because of the trauma that they've endured. And what we also notice is that post-traumatic stress disorder is also becoming very common in our community.
Why
right?
so? Why so?
It's like a war zone in our community, right? It's as though they are in another third world country, right? You're talking about gunshots. You're talking about the high rate of crime, right? And individuals becoming very desensitized by what they see, but at the same time, not being able to sleep well or being hyper vigilant, right? Walking into a neighborhood and thinking that, that they'll get hurt because of their past experiences, right? And always being on high alert, very defensive, right? And then also not being able to respond to what is considered to be normal.
Okay.
Right? So we find that in our community as well, definitely.
So are there any other majors or common disorders that you didn't mention?
I mean,
the one that we talked about last week where the weather affects us.
Yes.
Was I off base?
No, you were not. No, you were not. Seasonal affective disorder.
Seasonal affective disorder.
Right. It's a form of depression, but the depression is based on the weather or a particular time of the year.
Wow.
Yes.
So with that being said, and I don't know if you've ever been to Alaska, but we hear that Alaska has, and even Seattle, Washington, where it rains for days and days and days.
Yes.
In your experience, have you recognized that a lot of the individuals who have that particular disorder come from areas such as that?
Well, I have not, as a clinician, I have not treated individuals who've lived in those areas and have come to this area to receive support. I personally have not. However, research says that those individuals tend to suffer from seasonal affective disorder because of the weather, because of the, the gloominess and
right,
and that
the extended days of gray and rain.
Absolutely. But then it's not just, geared towards the season, right? And I've said this to you before. You have people during the holidays who become very sad and who become very depressed and isolate themselves because the Christmas season, the holiday season, is not as festive as most people would imagine it to be for some individuals. Right? Because it reminds them of the people that they do not have. Right? And so I've often said to individuals that I've worked with, who I've supervised as a clinical administrator, I said, you have to be very mindful of individuals during this holiday season. Suicide becomes increasingly alarming at that time as well, because it's, you're watching the commercials and, you're seeing people walking with their children and you see the lights and, everything's, you're supposed to be happy, but deep down inside, you're not. And you're trying to figure out, why is it that everyone else is happy? Why is it that, everything seems festive, but my feelings and my emotions are not catching up to what I'm seeing on the outside.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. And that can be very difficult. And we have to be very conscientious of other individuals.
And I wonder if that's what makes this conversation or this topic so paramount or paralyzing, because there's so many people walking around that we just don't know what they're dealing with and going through. And then in a lot of cases, perhaps they may not know why they're having these extended hours and or days of sadness and things like that.
Right.
So what happens? I mean, what do we do? Is that where, I guess, support systems need to come in? Family members need to say, well, hey, listen, I've just noticed that you've been stuck in your room for the last 3 days.
Right.
Wow, it looks like we've got a caller already. Good evening, caller. This is Curtis. You're live.
Good evening. Good evening, Curtis.
Hi.
Good evening, Ms. St. Amand. This is
Hello.
Jules, Dr. Jules.
Hi.
I wanted to see if St. Amand could just touch on mental health issues in terms of generational. Does she see that a lot of cases are generational and it's something that may have been passed down
Like
to the kids from generations above?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Jewel, for asking that question. It's a very good question. What we've noticed in research is that you have individuals when you're saying it's been passed down, you're talking about learned behaviors. You have individuals who learn to behave in such a way because they've seen their family members behave in such a way. So they learn that this is how I deal with a situation when I'm feeling angry and when I'm feeling sad. So it may mimic an actual diagnosis.
Right.
And then you also have those who are genetically predisposed to mental health issues. And this is something that is it's definitely something that needs to be discussed. Those who are bipolar or schizophrenic, right? That is something that can be passed down genetically.
Right.
Yes, it can. Yeah, and so when you're dating someone, you need to ask them, in addition to, whether you have sickle cell anemia, right? Right, because you know that if 2 individuals have the trait, they can produce a child with sickle cell. It's somewhat of the same kind of, mixture when you're talking about, mental illness.
Sure.
Ask the individual. Do you have any individuals in your family who may have had schizophrenia?
You're trying to scare the man away.
No, but these are real life questions, right? These are questions when you're deciding to really tie the knot. You need to know what you're getting into.
That's true.
I mean, just like anything else.
Right.
Right? And so, yes, it is also predisposed. You have individuals who have had a grandparent that may have dealt with or had challenges when it came to a diagnosis such as bipolar schizophrenia. And it can jump over generations, and an individual can end up having it.
Wow.
Yes.
I'm glad that she answered, because one of my next questions was going to be mental health in terms of relationship-wise. So she kind of dealt with that and how you need to ask those questions when you're dating and, you know, just ask about the family tree, the history of mental health and stuff. So I'm glad she answered that. And my other question was, do you believe that most people who struggle with drug addictions have a dual diagnosis, and it's a lot of times they are diagnosed with bipolar or something of that nature if they're struggling with drugs?
Absolutely.
We're
yes.
getting deep. That's actually a question that I had in my mind.
Okay.
Illicit drug use and its effect, and is that a cause?
Yes, illicit drug use can cause mental health issues because you're talking about drugs impacting the brain, right?
Sure.
You're talking about impacting the brain, and now the brain is not able to function. I'm going to make it very simple, very in simple terms. The brain is not able to function in such a way that it stabilizes you, right?
Right.
Because the brain requires enough endorphins, right?
Sure.
And things of that nature in order for it to function. But now what you're doing is you are using drugs and it's causing the brain not to function in a way that it's supposed to, right? And then you have individuals who are mentally ill and they're trying to deal with the symptoms of the mental illness, right? Whether it is, trauma, whether it is hearing voices, whether it's depression. And so what they end up doing is resorting to drug use as a medication, right? As opposed to going to the self-medicating,
right.
As opposed to going to the psychiatrist and getting the right dosage, the right prescription. They're going to street drugs to help deal and subdue the symptoms that they're dealing with at that time.
So thanks for your call tonight, caller. We appreciate that.
You're welcome.
If you would continue to listen to the show, we're going to open up the line if you don't mind.
Sure.
For anyone who is interested in calling in and asking a question or making a comment, please call in at 240-719-2560. That's great. That's powerful information. And when we talk about illicit drugs, are we talking about marijuana? Because now marijuana is becoming legal all around the world, all around the country in particular. But I don't know that marijuana is the one, because there are, pros and cons, obviously. But what drugs would you say are those that can lead? Is that tough? I'm sure you may not be.
I mean, we have the drugs that you're talking about, like
K2
the K2, right?
The synthetics and the
synthetic,
artificial.
You're on track. You're on target.
Because
right?
it's man-made.
It's man-made, and it is. I mean, it's potpourri, basically what that is. And you're sniffing it, and you're putting that into your system, and it's causing hallucinations or delusions. When we're talking about hallucinations, seeing and hearing things that are not actually there.
Wow. Looks like we have another caller. Good evening, caller. You're on the air with Curtis.
Good evening, Curtis and guests. My question is, my son attended Howard University, and his major was performing arts. His professor had recommended to the students in the class to seek counseling with a psychiatrist because of the many characters and different attitudes that they have to take and roles that they have to play. Do you think this is something that is a good idea?
That's interesting.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay, so you're talking about your son. He's currently in an acting program. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, and we know actors, right? Actors take on many different roles, and they embody whoever they're playing, and that can be very difficult, right? Because you're in a role, now you're asked to get out of that role. And it can be very difficult to transition from one person to another. And so therapy, what it does is it allows individuals to talk it out, right? To talk about what is happening, how they're feeling. And, and I've heard individuals such as actors have said, I've embodied, I'm going to use, that's what came to my brain was Ray Charles, when Jamie Foxx played Ray Charles.
Okay.
And if you remember that scene when he saw his brother die.
Yes.
And he took on the blame. and the guilt that came along with it. And in order for Jamie Foxx to embody Ray Charles, he had to become him.
Sure.
And so in order to become someone, you have to also, in order for this character to become alive, you have to take on their spirit. And so can you imagine taking on a spirit of an individual who for many years, because Ray Charles was a drug user for 35 years?
Okay.
Right? And the reason why he was a drug user was because he held on to that guilt of being and feeling responsible for the death of his youngest brother.
Sure. Okay.
Right? And so this, again, Jamie Foxx, I'm sure he had to go through therapy in order to let go of it.
Wow.
Right? Because he had to put that coat on. He had to wear the coat, scene after scene after scene for months.
Sure.
And now you have to be able to let it go. It takes counseling. It takes counseling. So yes, actors is very required. It is very necessary for an individual to function and to come back to real life.
Sure.
Right?
That's a great question, caller. I never would have thought about that, but
yes,
that's a great question. Did you get your question answered?
I did. It brought some clarity. Thank you so much. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
And
Thank
was
you.
that Ray Charles example helpful?
Oh yes. The different characters in the roles, playing prisoners, playing
Yes.
drug addicts, and yes, it was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
calling.
Thank you. That's powerful because in that case, it sounds like even mom needs to be able to deal with seeing
Sure.
her child going back and forth, playing a role, being who they are, and then diving into someone, like as she mentioned, a drug addict, playing
Right.
perhaps a drug addict or something like that.
Right.
Wow, that's interesting.
It is very interesting, and it's a great question. And
Yeah.
I say to individuals, and I also have a private practice. I say to individuals, therapy is needed. Everyone. It should be just as much as you have your child's pediatrician on speed dial or your dentist on speed dial. You should have your therapist on speed dial.
Sure.
Right? Because it's nothing like coming to someone who does not know you.
Mm-hmm.
And you go to their office and you just talk.
Sure.
And you're actively being heard without judgment.
Without any bias.
Without any bias, without
Right.
any judgment.
Correct.
And therapists, let me just say this. Therapists, our job is not to give advice. That's not what we do. Our job is to be able to be that sounding board for you. So when you're saying something about your life, oftentimes people verbally say it, but don't really hear themselves. And so what a therapist does is we just give it right back to you and paraphrase what you just said.
Okay.
And that in itself is powerful. And
Gotcha.
so, yes, I really would love to talk about, if we have an opportunity, to talk about what to look for in a therapist.
Actually, that was going to be that was kind of my lead in, because I was going to ask, well, what does an individual who may be struggling with these voices and this depression or schizophrenia, what do they look for in someone to assist them? How do they call for help, and what are some of the questions, let's say, they should ask a potential therapist or a psychiatrist?
Okay, so when you're talking about someone who has delusions or, hallucinations, such as someone with schizophrenia, right? We as clinicians, we often say that therapy is not the end-all, be-all. Why?
Therapy is not the
End-all,
be-all.
be-all. Why I say that is someone who's suffering from delusions and they have extreme symptoms, they require medication management as well. Okay? And so someone who's, maybe dealing with adjustment disorder, and that's another common diagnosis, is when you've been through, whether it's a divorce or whether it is a financial, challenge, and
Sure.
you're trying to get yourself back, oftentimes you'll feel sad, or oftentimes you'll have symptoms that is caused as a result of the condition or the situation that has changed in your life.
Okay.
Okay? And so when you're talking about something as minor as an adjustment disorder versus something that is schizophrenic, right, as high or intensified, I often say to individuals is that when you're looking for a therapist, look for someone that you feel comfortable with. When I say that, feel comfortable. So I've had men come to my office and ask for services. And I've asked them, why didn't you go to another man? And they would say, the reason why I did not go to a male is because I felt like that male was going to judge me when I shared my feelings. Okay? And so that's one example. Go to someone who you feel comfortable with. If you feel comfortable with a female versus a male, then you do that. 1. 2, you also want to be able to look for a therapist that has dealt with your situation, whether it's post-traumatic stress, whether it's depression, whether it's, divorce, whatever that is. You want someone that have had that experience.
You mean in their lives or has counseled others in that area?
Absolutely. Has counseled others in that area and has a specialty in that area.
Okay.
Right? I've had individuals who've said, I am a transitioning male or transgendered male.
Okay.
And I need to go to someone who understands the LGBT or Q generation, not generation, but population.
Sure.
Right. And so there are things that you need to look for, right? And then also a free consultation, going to them and just talking to them and seeing how you feel when you speak to them. Just like when you go to a primary care physician, right?
Sure.
You want to feel comfortable when they speak to you. You want to feel like they have your best interests at heart.
Right.
Right? Because if you don't feel comfortable, you're not going to speak. You're not going to feel safe. And that's the most important thing to remember, that you want to feel safe and you want to feel like when you're speaking to them that they're not going to judge you and they're not going to make you feel less than.
So let me ask this then. What is the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist?
Very good question. A psychiatrist has gone to med school. They've done their but they've done their internship at hospitals, right? Okay, or their rotations at hospitals. And they can write prescriptions.
For medications?
For medication, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. A psychologist has a PhD or doctorate, but they do not have the ability to write a prescription. That's the difference. One has gone to med school and the other has not.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. So then a psychologist then would prescribe, or a psychologist would refer you then to a psychiatrist if he or she, the psychologist, feels that you need medications.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have done it on many occasions. And it happened when I felt like what I was doing, and I use the example with my clients. I use the example of being in a 12 feet deep hole, okay? And follow me now, right? A 12 feet deep hole, and I'll say to them that as a therapist, I can get you up 6 feet up, right? But you still have an additional 6 feet to go up to get out.
Right.
And in order for me to get you to that place of actually coming out of the hole and seeing light, I might have to get some assistance, partner up with a psychiatrist that will support you to get you over the top. Right?
Wow. Okay.
Yes. Does that analogy work?
It does.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it. I understand.
Yeah.
And
I know you had concerns about whether to medicate or not to medicate, right?
Yeah, and I'm trying to find that lead in because that's something that we talked about briefly on last week, and I think that a lot of times our kids are, I don't know if misdiagnosed is the answer, but I believe that they are overly medicated. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to take a quick couple of minute break, a few minute break, and we're going to come right back and we're going to get right back into it. All right. Thanks for tuning in, you guys. This is In the End, We Win with Curtis, and we're going to take a short break. We've got a new sponsor, Jubilant Entertainment. That time is coming soon. The weather is going to be breaking, and Jubilant Entertainment provides all of your inflatable needs. And please tune in to the watch your monitor, because there'll be some information on Jubilant Entertainment. We've got a phone call coming in. We'll go ahead and take that, and then we'll go into break. Good evening. This is Curtis, and you're on with In the End, We Win with Curtis.
Yes, good evening. Unfortunately, I didn't catch your show last week, but I'm glad you invited the young lady back.
Thank you.
My question concerns dementia. I have a 97-year-old mother who, in the beginning of dementia, was given medication. I don't know exactly how long she was on this medication, but she is no longer being given the medication. Does dementia and mental illness, are they related in some form or manner? Are they totally separate?
Yes. Are you done asking the question?
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Repeat that.
Okay, so your question is dementia and mental illness the same thing, or are they completely two separate categories?
Are they separate?
Yes. Okay. So the question is that dementia can look like mental illness, right? But you said that your mother or your grandmother is 97 years old. Is that
My mother.
Mother. So 97 years old. You're talking about some things that come with age, right? And
Yeah.
so when they look at the age of the client, they'll say, well, this looks like this is part of the aging process, as opposed to her being mentally ill. Now,
Okay.
if you took a woman who was 45 experiencing levels of dementia with depression, then they would treat it more from a mental health perspective.
Oh, makes sense.
Okay, so I think what you're saying, dementia is more or less related to the age of the person.
Right, but when doctors make a diagnosis, or when myself as a clinician make a diagnosis, we take into consideration everything. We look at the age of the individual. We look at whether there were any drug use with the individual. We look at a number of components or criteria to make a judgment on whether it's considered to be a mental health issue.
Okay.
Okay, and so the doctor may have prescribed medication to help her cope with what was going on, right? The dementia, right?
Yes.
But they never diagnosed her with a mental illness. They just said that she was suffering from age-related dementia.
Sure.
Okay.
Does that make sense, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Since dementia is a form of mental illness, I was just wondering how far into the actual mental illness was it related, because there are various stages of dementia, and I think my mother is in the 4th stage.
Okay. Yes. Yes. And so, yes, it falls into the category of mental illness, but again, they'll treat it differently according to the criteria.
I got you.
Yes.
Okay,
Great.
well, thank you very much.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
for your call.
Thank
Uh-huh.
you.
Bye-bye.
And we're going to break right now, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back in like 2 to 3 minutes. Thank you.
I walk by faith and not by sight. All power and authority is given unto me. 'Cause when you're on God's side, oh, we win, we win. Overcomers, we win. Nothing can stop us now. Hey, we win, you declare. We proclaim the victory, yeah. Overcomers, we win, yeah. Nothing can stop us now. We win. Oh. We know in God there's no spirit of fear. We'll never feel defeat because He's here. The race is not given to the swift, neither the battle to the strong, but He that endureth to the end. We win. Woo! Come on, come on. We win, say. We win. We win, yeah. We win, yeah. Every area of our life. Yeah, we win. Overcomers. In our schools, on our job. Nothing can stop us now. In marriage, in our finances. We are, yeah. More than a conqueror. We dominate. We have the victory. Yeah. We have the victory. Woo!
All right, welcome back, everyone. You are tuning in to In the End We Win with Curtis, and our guest for today is a continuation of our conversation from last week, Miss Natasha Harris St. Amand, and we are going to now get into that topic. You mentioned earlier, we gave out the hotline number to
Yes.
suicide, and I should have
And
addressed it then. I apologize. Go ahead. You had something you want to say?
Yeah, and there's also the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and that is a place where you can call and ask any of these questions that you're asking tonight. Questions regarding, dementia, questions regarding resources, questions regarding a crisis hotline. And
Sure.
in the DMV, District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia, it's called NAMI. NAMI, and it's a 1-800 number. They're open from Monday through Friday from
Okay.
10 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you can ask any of those questions that you're asking tonight. That number is 1-800-950-NAMI, NAMI, which is 6264. So that number is 1-800-950-6264.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Great. I think we have a caller on the line. Good evening, caller. This is Curtis. You're on with. Hello.
Hello?
Please, do you mind turning your laptop, your computer down,
Okay.
please, and listen to your phone?
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank
Hi.
you. Hi.
How can we help?
Yes, I'd like to call in and make a comment on the show.
Sure. Absolutely. You're on live right now. We can hear you.
Hi, how are you?
Wonderful.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, I'm just calling. I have a comment. I went to Miss Natasha St. Amand. About a year ago. I went for like a year and a half, and I never thought I would go to counseling, but I was having some personal issues,
And I had wonderful family and friends, but I felt that I needed a professional. So a girlfriend recommended her, and I went, and she was fabulous. We connected. I was able to express myself. She didn't judge. She would ask me why did I feel a certain way, etc. And it turns out that she didn't take my insurance plan. So I was just listening earlier how you have to connect with your person. So I had to make a decision whether I was going to pay out of pocket or find another person.
Sure.
But I had connected so to her that I decided to pay out of pocket.
Wonderful.
And it was one of the best things that I've ever done. So I'm in a good place. I recommend to my family and friends, if you're having some issues, I know there used to be a stigma years ago, but I think it's a wonderful thing to do.
So where are you calling from?
From the Washington, D.C. area.
Wonderful. And you said about a year or so ago?
About a year ago, yes.
And how are you doing now?
Fabulous. I'm in a wonderful place.
Wonderful.
I'm at peace, and the issues that I have, I've moved forward. So it was a wonderful thing for me to go through.
Would it be too much to ask what the diagnosis was? Is that prying too much?
I think she felt that I was depressed.
Okay.
I was having an issue with an ex-boyfriend and some family issues.
Wonderful.
So I think I was slightly depressed.
And that's what I wanted to get, because I think that will help our other listeners. And because there may be something that now when they hear you say you were going through something through a relationship, now maybe that will spark them to either reach out to us, reach out to Natasha, or go and find someone in their community. So I appreciate that. Was that it? Did you have anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in.
Bye-bye.
Go ahead. You can stay. She's probably still listening.
Yes, caller?
Well, she may have hung up and now is listening too.
Yeah. Well, caller, let me just say this. I appreciate her calling in, and she's a testimony to therapy that works.
Right.
And about actually taking the advice of others by saying, you know what, maybe you should talk to someone. Maybe you should look into counseling. I know that this is not something that you're used to. I know that there's a stigma that's attached to those who go to therapy.
Sure.
Right? And she decided to win. She decided to think about herself and put herself first. Right?
And that's a great question. Do you find that in these counseling sessions, especially early on in the relationship, that there's a battle, if you will, between you and trying to get that person or that individual to understand where they are?
Okay. And so, as I had said before, I had alluded to the fact that I am not here to give advice. I don't give advice. The fact that the individual has come to my office, and the fact that they had the courage enough to say, I need help, I applaud them where they are at that moment. Because it takes courage for someone to say, I feel different than I was before. I feel like things are not what it should be. And the fact that they have taken the first step to seek counseling, I commend them and I applaud them. After that, I'm hearing what's going on with them. My job is not to rush the process, right? Because in my head, and other people, I would say, if I'm embodying someone outside of a therapist, right, I would say, hurry up. Don't you see it? Don't you see what's going on? Why don't you get better? Why don't you see that this situation is not the best for you?
Sure.
But that's not the role that I play. I allow the client to guide. I guide the relationship. I guide the therapy session, but I don't rush the process. If that individual is not there at that moment, my job is not to push them. My job is to get them, and I use the analogy, and I use a lot of analogies in my session. I am with the client, they have glasses on, right? And they have mud on their glasses. What I am the windshield wipers. I just remove the dirt and the mud that is sitting on their glasses for them to see. But that takes time, and it takes a willingness and an open heart for that person to want to do that.
Sure.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does.
Yes.
It absolutely does. How about children?
How about children?
How about children?
Yes.
Their minds are still forming.
Yes.
So that establishment of the relationship may take a little while longer, or whatever their challenge is may be that much more difficult, and they haven't figured out how to tone it down and sit still and long enough to want to listen to you.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that session go?
Okay, well, I started my career actually as a play therapist at
A
Bellevue.
play therapist.
A play therapist at Bellevue Hospital
Hold
in
on,
New
Bellevue
York.
Hospital. I've heard about that in movies, haven't I? Right?
It's a psychiatric hospital in New York.
In New York,
It's
right,
very
okay.
much like St. Elizabeth's,
Right, okay.
But just kind of like an upscale, hospital.
Okay, New York.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
And I started my career as a play therapist with children as young as 4, right? Children who have dealt with trauma. And what we do, and what I did back then, and even when I have clients as children, I work with them through play.
Okay.
Through play, right? Because a child can tell you everything through a drawing, through, dolls, right? And it's through their interaction and their play that you can really support them, because children don't have the verbal capacity, right, to communicate what is going on emotionally.
Right.
Right.
Wow.
But they can actually do it in play.
Okay.
Right? They can
Wonderful.
do it in, drawing or
Acting
just
it out,
acting it out
performing it.
and creatively, demonstrating what is happening to them.
Sure.
Right? And so, or sandboxes and just a number of different things. And when you're able to understand a child's mind and understand how to provide therapy and teaching them coping strategies through play, you've won.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
And so, when you're talking about children not being able to sit still, if they're on the floor playing, that's where you
get
are.
down there.
You get down there too, and
Wonderful.
you be where they are. And it creates a level of genuine trust
Wonderful.
and rapport with that child.
Right. Okay. So
Yes.
we've got about 10 minutes before we wrap up.
10 minutes
Once
already?
It
Oh my
flies.
gosh.
I know. Trust me. I know.
I have so much to say.
Great. Well, we're going to try to get some of that out of you.
Sure.
Suicide now. Earlier, when we started the show out tonight, you gave out the hotline number. Is that a common end, unfortunately, to some of the clients that you've seen, or mental health disorders? Does it always end in someone going on a rampage and shooting up a school, or is suicide a common end? Is it always like death and destruction for an individual, or like the caller, she called in and she got the resolve? She says she's in a happy place now, but depression may not be as severe as, let's say, schizophrenia or bipolarism, if that's a word, and or some of the PTSDs. Where does suicide fit in there?
Okay, so we won't say and make a blanket statement and say that it is something that everyone does when they're dealing with such,
Right.
intensified levels of mental illness.
Sure.
We wouldn't say that.
Right.
But what we would say is that suicide is real, and it happens as young as 8 and 7 years old, when they feel like there's no way out, when they feel like no one is hearing them. There was an incident that happened, and I can't remember. It was at a day school that happened in D.C. with a young girl. She was 11 years old.
Sure.
Who was found in her
Less
room
than a month ago.
about less than a month ago.
Right.
She hung herself.
Yeah,
And you say, my God, what would make a child do that?
correct.
Right.
Bullying, I think, is what they...
Absolutely. Right. But is that, when you're talking about mental illness and suicide, it's used as a coping skill.
What's that?
Suicide.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's used as a coping skill, and when I say a coping skill, it's used as a coping to resolve.
Because they don't know any other way.
Exactly.
They haven't figured out any
other way.
Right.
Absolutely, and this is why the conversation that we're having tonight is so vital, and it's so important, because we want people to know that there are other options out there. There are people that care, and there are resources that are available to support you in the midst of a crisis. And you can get better, right?
Sure.
And there is an end to this, not necessarily through death, but of course through healing.
Okay.
Right? And so that in itself is the key. letting people know that they can be informed, that they can make a difference, and they can decide differently.
Okay.
Yes.
And then what about these medications?
What about that?
Because it seems like they want to medicate for everything. Is medication the answer to being able to avoid suicide? Or can someone just come into your office and talk it out? And
Well, people can talk it out, absolutely. But I do not want to sit here and say, like I told you last show, that I cannot say that medication is not something that helps or it's something that doesn't help.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say that it helps in many cases, and then there are cases where it doesn't help, right?
Okay.
But you have to know what you're dealing with. You have to be more informed. You have to do your research. You have to ask questions, right? And yes, is medication often the solution or usually the answer? Yeah, right?
Really?
Because we understand that that's what they're pushing, medication, 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 right? But again, medication without therapy doesn't work. Therapy without medication in many instances, or some cases I would say, wouldn't work, right? So I always say it's great to have therapy and medication if you're going to use one or the other, primarily medication, right? You can provide therapy and not necessarily need medication, but if you're providing medication, you definitely want therapy involved.
Got you.
Yes.
Okay. So in the remaining few minutes,
Yes.
now we've talked about the scenario of, and we had a caller to call in and talk about her child that is in a drama class or is taking classes, and the instructor suggests that each participant in the class go and seek counseling. Okay. So, and you explained how it's important for them because they have to take on other people's issues in order to be effective in portraying that person.
Right.
Now I want to talk about the counselor themselves. Because who does the counselor see to counsel them? Because if you're listening to all of these individuals that are coming in and they are laying down everything that's in their life, you are then taking on each of those clients.
Absolutely.
Is that accurate?
That is accurate. In my training and schooling, it is advised, highly recommended that we go and get our own therapist.
Okay.
Right? Because we need to know how it feels to be on the other side, one. Two, you need to be able to release and let go of all of those bags that have been handed to you, and the person said, I'll be right back, and they never come back. Does that make sense? Right? And so, yes, therapists usually have their own therapists that they can share with. In addition, we have activities, things that we do to let go and relieve stress and relieve the things that we've heard.
Okay.
Right? For me, it is working out. I exercise at least 5 times a week, right? That helps me. That helps me to let go of what has been shared and dropped on my table. And that works. And I can admit I have had a therapist because I needed it at that time when I was working with children and they were going, I saw trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma. And how do you deal with that when you are a therapist and you want, at the time, I want to be a mom. Can I, it was just so much.
Sure.
And so I had to let go of that and talk to someone about it.
Right.
And so that is important. That's important, and it is something that's necessary. I did want to say that I have a class coming up, actually a free webinar that will be taking place this Thursday at 7 p.m., and you can go to my website, natashaparis.com. It's Etiquette 101.
Etiquette 101.
How to make a first impression.
BMW. Bread, meal, water. When I think of etiquette, I'm thinking of being able to set a dinner table.
Right, but there's so much more. It's so much more. So natashaparis.com, click on that. On my website, there's a tab that says events, and you click on the events tab, and that will take you to the class or free webinar, which is sponsored by Eventbrite. and just register.
So what are people going to experience on this webinar?
And
Without giving it away, of course.
Of course not, of course. But I'm gonna just give you a little appetizer
There
right
you go.
now.
Absolutely.
Just a little
Draw 'em
appetizer.
in.
Just a little
That's right.
appetizer. So being able to leave a lasting impression, not just with an employer, but someone that you're dating, right? Or someone that you have just met, right? And so what we're gonna talk about is how to increase your confidence in a matter of 15 minutes.
Okay, so now are we talking about someone who has been diagnosed?
No.
Or are we talking about just the general public? Anyone is welcome.
Yes, the general public.
Because I want to clarify that because this show
we were
is
talking
about mental health.
illness. Absolutely, absolutely. But this is not just for those who are dealing with mental illness. It's for everyone. Because again, when I talk and I do workshops and I facilitate professional staff developments, what I often say is that it's important for you to know yourself. It's important for you to build levels of confidence.
Absolutely.
If you're dealing with trauma, you need to know how to get over the trauma and be able to cope, right? And then also step foot and be confident, right? And if you are dealing with just the general anxieties of life and you feel like you can't sit up straight and let people know that you're here and that you own the room, yeah, that's another person that can benefit from that class. Yeah, so all walks of life, right? At least age 16 and up, even 15, right?
Sure.
But it is a webinar for everyone.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So do us a favor. Give your
Yes.
information out again. Give your contact numbers, your addresses, your emails,
Yes.
whatever it is, so people can get in contact with you for both.
Yes.
If they want to sit down and speak with you about issues that they're having, or if they just want to participate in some of your sessions, your classes.
Yes. Okay. So NatashaParis.com, NatashaParis.com. If you are interested in workshops and etiquette training and professional staff development, for your team, if you have a team of individuals and you really want to take it to the next level. In addition to that, you can follow me on Instagram, which is Etiquette Coach for You, okay? And that's on Instagram. And then I also, just last night, I started a group for individuals to just go in and ask questions, because I have a YouTube channel coming out the ending of this month. I am so excited.
Oh, wonderful.
It's going to be called The Morning Tea with Etiquette Therapist Natasha Paris, and everything etiquette in addition to dealing with mental health issues.
That's a lot.
Yes,
You
that's
got a lot going on.
I do. I stay busy, but you know what? I do it for the people, primarily because there are people that need this information. And I would be very selfish if I held it all to myself, right? Because my job and everyone else's job is to be change agents, is
That's
to
right.
be able to make a difference and to help individuals improve their lives and take it to the next level, because we all deserve to be the best we can be.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful. Wow, that is a lot. And I know, obviously, we have not completely gone into everything that there is to know about mental health and mental health disorders, but that's pretty much going to wrap up our show. That's been 2 weeks that we've spent on this topic. I believe that you have given out a lot of quality information that people can use. We've gotten some great questions, people calling in, and I think these last two shows have been excellent, and I pray and believe that for those of you who are out there, that you have heard something tonight and or last week that will help you in the long run. So I encourage you all to do what's best for yourself, even for your family and your friends. Let's not be selfish, right? And make sure that you are getting the support that you need to make sure that you are operating at your fullest capacity. And that's going to wrap it up for us tonight.
Yes.
We thank you for tuning in. I thank you for tuning in. Miss Natasha, I thank you for lending us your time 2 weeks in a row on a Monday night.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on your show. I really greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. I believe it was very well received, and we're going to sign out. We will see you guys next week. As a matter of fact, I can put it out there. I've got a couple coming on. I'm gonna put it out there now, just so that you guys can tune in. I've got a couple who will be coming on to the show on next week that were both drug addicts, and now they're married and have been married for a significant number of years. And we're going to talk to them a little bit about how they did it, what they're doing, and it kind of coincides with our conversations over the last 2 weeks. So if you're not doing anything, I encourage you to look on and perhaps call in and lend your clinician's ear.
Okay, absolutely.
And we appreciate it. So thank you all. We had another dynamite show. We will see you guys next week on In the End We Win with Curtis. Thanks a lot and good night.
Good night.